Dakin, and this is my successful funding show. On this show, we talk about funding, all kinds, different things for different purposes, but most of my work deals with small businesses, with community economic development, trying to make things a little bit better, but trying to ease the entire process so that the raising of funding is not a distraction. It's not something that can kill you off and allows you to get back to whatever it is your primary goal in life is with your organization. So, with that, today I have with me one of my favorite people, Don Cohen. Don is a mentor, coach, guru to me on LinkedIn, everything involving LinkedIn, but particularly LinkedIn Live, because he's helped teach me how to do this particular show to advance my own agenda, my own goals, and trying to build a community who are all involved in helping fund small businesses so they can start and grow and be all that they can be. And today, typically Don on his show, which I was on yesterday, we there's a topic of the day. So I've created a topic. It's a little complicated, so we'll try to make it clear. But if you want to form a community from scratch, if you want to organize a neighborhood for economic development, you want to create an affinity group to move a cause forward, you want to do something, you need to form a community. And there is a challenge in that you need to communicate this desire, this goal, these missions. You need to facilitate building relationships. You need to do all these things, and communications ends up being like the common thread on how all these things can be accomplished. So, since Don is an expert on this and knows everything you could ever want to know on this particular topic, I have invited Don to share his massive wisdom in the small amount of time we have today to try to cover this immense topic. And you in the audience are invited to participate. You can say hello, you can ask a question, you can make a comment. Those are welcome because actually this program's for you. It's not for me and Don. Don and I talk all the time, but we want to do something that shares some value, some benefit to you. So feel free to jump in at any time in the comment section, and we'll go from there. So with that, Don, please start off giving me the usual background on how did you get to here today that made you an expert on communicating on LinkedIn.
Well, thank you so much, Carl, for having me with you today. I'm so honored and excited to share the stage again. I know we come together on my show at least once a week, typically, cover a lot of areas, specifically funding and different nuances to educate and make people aware of opportunities or better define them for people who need a little more definition. Basically, gravitated to LinkedIn after COVID began. Everybody came inside, everybody moved from the physical world to the virtual world, and LinkedIn seemed like a great landing spot for most people. Did traditional LinkedIn, posting, commenting, connecting. And then approximately 2 years, give or take, I gravitated to LinkedIn Live and just saw the full potential of real time with real people having real conversations with relevant subject matter that could generate enough value to justify everybody's efforts. With that said, over time have been able to build a really strong collaboration group of live streamers, have about 7 people in it. Carl's an honored member of that group and has given us a chance to go shoulder to shoulder on really bridging what our different experiences is to really formulate something that's a quality presentation and communication vehicle that can be leveraged by so many more people for a competitive advantage. So that brings us up to date and just love the learning curve that we're starting to take advantage of and the synergies that come with bringing different people together, doing the same, let's say, medium, using it, but for different purposes, and everybody's learning as everybody else is learning. So just the best of the best of win-win.
Well, thanks for that, Don. And yeah, I've known Don for a long time, but we hooked back up here last year as I was trying to figure out how to either reframe myself or reposition myself or recommunicate myself. The whole variety of different words that involved there, but I'm continuing to try to adjust to the new normal, as we call it, post-COVID, where we do more communication in this format that is online video than the usual coffee shop, get together for a beer, any kind of physical in presence type of meeting. Not that I don't like those, but when you start thinking about it, you're saying, hey, I could have 20 meetings during the day of a half hour each, or I could have 2 or 3 meetings that are physical. So I have a chance to do more, accomplish more within this time frame. And so the result of that is that I'm using this medium more and more. And then again, I'm looking at all forms of communication. I can send a email to one person. I think I've sent out 10 or 12 already this morning. Um, and again, these are singular. It's a one-on-one type of relationship. But as I'm trying to share information on funding to help other people learn about funding, LinkedIn Live allows me to go to anyone who wants to get on the LinkedIn social media platform. We're also dual broadcasting this on Facebook and YouTube. So we have 3 different mediums all at the same time sharing information, which could cover a significant portion of the world if everybody wanted to tune in. But because of the medium, this show is not only live, where you get a chance to interact with us, but it's also recorded. So if this doesn't fit in your day, or you had 20 other things all scheduled for 8 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, you can go back and catch this show at any time, almost forever. I'm not sure if and when LinkedIn's going to start saying, well, I think 40 years is too long to keep all these things together and cut us off. But for the moment, you can go back to all my shows that all are in this year, 2024. So we have somebody who has joined us from the audience, Shamira. Thank you for joining us this morning. We welcome you in the audience. If you have a question or comment, feel free to chip in, because as I said, this program's for you, and we want to give you as much value out of the program as possible. So Don, with that, you and I both know we're all members of different communities, and we can define them generally in 2 groups, what I call this is my neighborhood, which is a geographic area. But then we also have groups that have common cause. So I'm like a small business advocate, and more specifically funding a small business advocate. So we can use communications to form these groups, to grow these groups, to improve the quality and the benefit from these groups. When you start thinking about communication, what's the first thing that you're thinking of in getting the word out?
Great question. And my answer is relevancy. It's too easy to get caught in the crowd noise, have a lot of people, but at the end of the day, they're not focused or interested in the direction you may be going. And I found over time, it's better to do more with less players on a live stream. The other key element that most people may not be fully aware of is most communities. I could have, let's say, 10,000 followers, and Carl could have 10,000 followers. And we're doing the same type of business in the same industry. But what's interesting is only 80% of those, about 80% will be unique to us, and 20% will be shared. So if you picked up 3 people with 10,000, you're going to pick up 24,000 new connections around the table that no one had. And synergy is key and leverage is key. So, LinkedIn has a billion registered members. How do you get your arms around that? You really can't, but you can carve out a niche and then find aligned related people in that niche, and everybody wins together, everybody learns together, and everything becomes more interesting for the audience because now there's new faces, there's new thoughts, new experiences. So, how do you keep it dynamic? How do you keep it exciting? How do you keep it interesting? Because every show earns a membership ticket to the next show. So if someone says, "Hey, that was great," and there's so many ways to win here as an audience. You could win through the knowledge, through the connection and awareness of somebody like myself or Carl, but you can also win by learning how to do this and in integrating this into your plan. So, I'm focused primarily in how do you make your time, thought, and resources more effective on LinkedIn. And so it's not always doing more, it's doing different things, different ways, distinguishing, differentiating yourself from the crowd, and really elevating where you are to, where you could be. And I think that's so important. So, hopefully that answers your question, Carl.
Well, yes, it's a great starting point because essentially what we're saying is that there's why would any two people want to talk to each other? There's got to be some benefit that comes out of that. That benefit, typically the relevance, has to do with what they have in common, what they can benefit in common. And so if I want to go play pickleball, can't play pickleball myself. I need someone to be my opponent, the person I'm going to compete against to play. So I need someone else. If I'm going to try to do something that's of greater magnitude, like I want to raise money into a small business and I want to do it in small dollar amounts that everybody can afford, then I need a crowd. I need enough people to make the small dollar investments to meet the investment goals of that small business. And now we may be talking hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people that need to come together, and they have to have the relevance, as you say. And so as we're communicating, it needs to be obvious. It needs to be not something where we have to teach, educate somebody that this is relevant. We need to be somehow getting that across in our messaging and what we're saying so that the person can make their own determination. This is about me, for me, it's relevant to me. I should be in this group. And as you say, there's so much value in this. I should come back and have another conversation, whether that be in a LinkedIn Live program, whether it's in a newsletter, a podcast, a poll, any other way of exchanging information that is mutually beneficial to both people that are in the conversation. So, how do you go about measuring relevance, Don? What would be some things to look for other than simply people signing up or subscribing to your show or to your newsletter?
Yeah, excellent again. What I found is if you look at, well, you begin with someone's profile. At that point, you get a superficial, fast look, and some things you just say, yeah, this person's in my orbit, and I could see value in connecting with this person. Assuming it goes to the next step, which is, could this person be a great guest on my show? Well, that usually lends itself to a Zoom call. And at that point, you can get beyond the facade of self promotion or having somebody who's got a picture 40 years younger than they really are, and get to know the person, because how you feel is how your audience is going to feel on first impression. And some attributes are not typically just professional. Some of it is how exciting are they? How happy are they? How do they project? And then at that point, I always say the first one's on me, the second one's on them. So I'll support somebody to a guest host, depending on how they do and how they feel after what they do, could determine if we do it again. I've also acquired a saying that if there's no future, there probably isn't a present. So if I can't see an opportunity to grow together, build together, share together, and it doesn't have to be in like kind. Somebody may have a lot of experience or uh, authority in a certain area that I want to get to know, and maybe that's the case. The other thing is networking. Is who circle of influence do you want to include in your circle of influence and share? Because again, you're promoting somebody. Initially, it's to your show. Initially, it's to your network, but eventually, it's the people who see you, who know you, and now you have a chance to introduce, refer. So there's a networking opportunity, there's a communication opportunity, and there's a learning opportunity. I've done about 800 of these shows, and over time, you get better with every show because you learn from the person you're with, but you also learn from yourself to say, oh, here's a shortcut, here's a way of getting audience reaction. And it just helps you kind of mold together something that's somewhat unique and attractive. And again, everybody's experience has to be your top priority. So I always go audience first, guest second, me third. Have I made this a worthwhile experience for the audience? Have I made this a beneficial experience for the guest? Will that want to motivate them to come back, to learn, and to grow together? Because you can make thousands and tens of thousands of connections, but it may just fall flat. Plus, one has to look at the dynamics of the medium. Typically, you post some text, it sits there, someone eventually sees it, ultimately, someone may respond to it, and then you respond to them. That's very slow, it's very small, and people forget the next day what posts they read, what they commented. It's more like wink, wink, nod, nod. The serious people aren't afraid to come out of the shadows, aren't afraid to be seen for who they are and what they are. This is a great platform for the people who are hit and run, you transactional, throwing spaghetti against the wall. This doesn't work because you get seen very early on for who you are, and more importantly, how you treat others. Too many people come on shows thinking, I'll sell somebody something, I'll get a speaking engagement. And it's usually me, and more me. And it's really the people who say, hey, go first. Because how you treat others is how you're going to treat others who are watching you treat others. So you're projecting, and what is the result of that hour on the audience, of the host, and how worthwhile was it, and how eye opening was it? Because people don't know what they don't know. If all you've done is a certain thing, you work within that universe. When someone opens a door to something new and exciting and different, all of a sudden, what was maybe important becomes less important, and what wasn't known becomes the thing you want to attach to. And some people are just love communicating, love talking, love sharing. Initially, it's a little tenuous because it's new. People get a little intimidated by a live audience. But I always look at it as a conversation between me and the person on the show with me, and having the people in the audience getting the benefit as opposed to us not focusing on important, relevant areas. And you're right, audience participation is key because it's like feedback, right? A comedian doesn't know how funny their jokes are until they hear laughter, right? Everybody could be enjoying it, but until that first laugh hits, you start to come inside and say, oh my goodness, wrong audience, wrong dialogue, whatever. So it's really, there was a saying, I think it was George Washington, but it's been attributed to so many presidents, is if they had 5 hours to cut a tree, they'd spend 4 hours sharpening their axe. And, it's the same thing. To get better, you got to be better. To be better, you have to surround yourself with people who are already where you want to be or hope to be. And I think those are key. So, long answer to a quality question.
Well, we're going to dive into this a little bit more because there are several elements that you covered in that. So, in talking about relevance, the first thing is, who truly are you trying to be relevant to? Is it to the guest that you've invited onto your show? Yes, but more importantly, it's to your audience. You're trying to do something that is important enough to them that they took the time to invest in listening to your show and hearing what you and your guest are conversing about. And for them to come back, then they have to think that they got greater value out of that time than all the other things that are competing for their time. So it ends up being very, very important. As I listen to your show and different guests over time, I keep picking up information, tidbits of techniques, or how to do something, or thinking process that allows me to look at a problem differently. And it's a building process where I feel like I'm investing the time to listen, but I'm getting good value back in the audience. And so you've got two things going on at the same time. You're communicating to the audience by your conversation with your guest. So the other part of the relevance is your guest and your conversation something the audience is going to benefit from? Can that guest bring something to the conversation that the audience will appreciate and say, I'll be back again tomorrow? Because if, as you said, if you bring on a guest who's a dud, that's the nicest way I'm going to put it, that they're all self-promoting about themselves, then the audience goes, I don't need that. I can get sales and advertising anywhere I look. I came here for something different. And determining what that is, I think is part of the challenge. Is what is the content? What is the topic? How is that topic presented? How do you present that in a way that the audience can see it, understand it, get value from it? And that has to do with how you manage the conversation with your guests. Something you've taught me is that having this type of a conversation is way more valuable, useful, entertaining, informative, whatever word we want to put on it, than me standing up and doing a webinar where I'm preaching at you some technique. And it isn't that I'm not giving you good value, but it's all one-sided. It's not interactive, and it's kind of a take it or leave it, hope it sticks and doesn't bounce kind of a thing. And when somebody gets on and starts pitching, you're like, well, they're talking about themselves. They're not talking necessarily about the audience. They're telling the audience they want something from the audience, and that tends to serve the whole purpose. So now we're going to take a 10-minute break from my. No, I'm just going to take a sponsorship break. uh, but I think it's very important. I've really learned a lot because I used to do podcasting and found it wasn't working for me. I couldn't quite see one. I didn't have audience interaction, so I was talking to myself. I wasn't getting a lot of feedback, which is not uncommon. So you didn't know how to guide where it was going. Where in the live stream, you basically have a conversation. A conversation goes wherever it goes. Hopefully, you stay reasonably on topic. But I've found that this interaction with the audience helps kind of keep you on the road in the right direction, because the audience is, in effect, the listener, the person you're trying to serve and benefit from the conversation. So as you listen for the feedback, you've commented before that only a few people will comment. I don't know at the moment, because I'm still learning this whole process, how many people are watching the show right now. And it could be a huge number. It may be relatively small at the moment. But without the audience participation, how do you know how you're getting anything done?
That's a good question. Well, LinkedIn actually, if you go to your post, even right now, and click on, and this will come up, it will show you how many unique visitors have been here. It will show you how many comments, and it's under analytics. So if you go to post, you see this, you go down further, it'll show you some numbers. But to your point and how I've evolved over time, it's almost like creating an advisory board that shows up for you when you show up. So it could be the people in our group, and that's what it's really distilled into. 10, 12, pretty much everyday people who show up for each other. The other benefit of having a cohort group is everybody's on the same team. Everybody's more inclined to go to your home games and get in your stands. And those are the people you want who are going to be consistent. And consistency is a key word. Showing up over and over again so you've developed top of mind awareness, you develop dependability. You know, I was doing a 7-day a week show for a year and a half, cut down to Monday through Thursdays, because I, again, expanded and compressed. Where is the real value? I mean, I've had over, I'd say, 150 unique people on this show out of 800. And I could have 150 back next week, but it doesn't fit as much as what I have because you only need enough to work with what you need. Anything excess is either dilution from your priority or just getting a little bit less relevant. The other thing I think people have to appreciate, and this is what I learned and I believe, is there's three elements of value you bring to a live stream. That's education, inspiration, and entertainment. So someone could be extremely entertaining and make that worthwhile for the person. Someone could be a great offset to you, where someone could be sharing a different way of looking at things. And now you've got variety, you've got a little diversity, and that's really the final product. Because another thing, and I'm loving this conversation, is what we have is a studio audience, right? The true continuing audience happens after the show is over. And, just like if you had a comedy show, you might have 150 in the audience, you might have 20 million watching it. But the show's already done by the time the audiences watches. So what content, what value in the hour are you providing? Whether you have one guest, I mean, one person commenting or more. The other element relative to guest participation or audience participation is I found in the most interesting conversations sometimes have the least comments. Why? Because people are focused on what's going on. They don't want to get off of their thought process and move into another question. And I think at the end of the day is what came out of the conversation, because your show, just like my show, is non-scripted. We don't know where it's going to go, and that makes it more interesting for us, because why try to take a stagnant target on a moving target? So if you're saying, well, I'm going to say this, well, maybe the audience isn't in the mood at this point in the show for it. And at a certain point, you're forcing things instead of letting things naturally develop and being who you really are. Because people want to know, who is Carl? Who is Don? How do they think? What are they into? And are they accessible? Are they approachable? And we are. There's a mystique that sometimes when you see somebody on the screen, they become bigger than life, or hopefully they do in some ways. But in most cases, you get humbled over time. You get humbled by the technical issues here. You get humbled by the guest issues, the audience issues, but that keeps you on your toes, keeps you really being aware, not to take anything for granted. And what you have experienced is what other people like you will experience when they get to that situation. So, there's plenty of room on the boat, But a lot of people either take things for granted and just assume you can just walk on, do whatever you do. And it really creates a disservice to yourself and the people around you versus really promoting what someone does. I think some of the best conversations is someone just said something that was even better than you could have thought of. So why change the subject when you can give praise and say, hey, Carl, wonderful point about that. I want to ask a question or I want to add to it. And now you're building together versus building separately. Okay, well, you had your 3 minutes, let me have mine. And you get more competitive into who brings more value, who can top that story. I mean, and keeping it positive. Someone who just says, I just got hit by a bus yesterday, and then the next person says, well, you think that's some? I got hit by 2 buses last week. And it becomes frivolous in a way. And I think everybody wants to take their time, take their day, and make it more beneficial for the investment they make. And every day is a new day. Every show is a new show. How ready are you? How relevant are you? And it takes time. And in the beginning, you don't know what the cycle is. So you're planting seeds, you're creating shows, you're inviting guests, and you're still wondering, where is this going? Where could it go? And then all of a sudden someone shows up 3 months later you forgot about because life got in the way, or what your top priority isn't their top priority. And that's why once you have your group, work with that group. I mean, I have 4 shows a week. I have about 7 people who are my co-pilots. I can bring in a third person usually, which is a guest that they suggest or somebody I do that I know is going to be a good fit. But here's another value is strategic pairing. I know I paired Carl up with wonderful people like Ford, you may not know, or Todd, or you name it. But now it gave them a chance to meet each other in ways they probably wouldn't have. Oh, here we have Carrie here with us. So, anyways, hopefully that addresses it. I mean, I'm not limited by time and experience in what I'm doing, so love to share.
So this is an example where Carrie is a regular member of the audience of Don's show, and he has been kind enough to join me on my show with Don this morning. And Carrie loves to give an element of humor every time that he is in the audience, which I appreciate because it keeps the conversation light. And in this case, Carrie says, you know why the comedian had sheep on the stage with him. He had to have material for such bad jokes. and uh, so thank you, Carrie. Appreciate your contribution of humor to today's show. I myself try to tell a few bad jokes from time to time, and I can profess that yes, some of them are very bad. So we'll go from there. Um, with that, um, we're looking at we've determined that relevance is a reason for any two people to talk together, which is a pairing. But now, if we want to build a community, that is, we want a whole bunch of people who all have relevance. How would we go about building this? You made a reference to including people in their networks, and I think that is clearly one of the keys to doing it. But how would you go about going from one-on-one to one in a huge number of people who all have common relevance?
Well, that's a good question. You come up with great questions, and I love it because I have good answers to them also. Is I went from a push strategy to a pull strategy. And what that means is I only reach out to people who've already made an effort in some way to reach out to me. And what that means is who connected with me in the last few days, who looked at my profile in the last few days. I'm very strong on polling. Every poll I do has between 47 and maybe 80 some responses every day. out of 50 to 80 people. And these are people who I may not see, because what I learned about LinkedIn is some people love polls. Some people love live streams. Some people like audio events. Some people like posts. If you try to uh, pigeonhole somebody into one activity, you're going to miss people. And out of 80, there probably is five or six I haven't seen before, five or six I haven't reached out to. And gratitude goes a long way. And the idea, oh, they looked at me, I'm going to sell them. No, what I did is thank you for visiting my profile. Have a return comment. I see we have this in common. I believe you may become a great guest on my live stream. Let's have a Zoom. Typically, it goes, you're searching through LinkedIn, slicing and dicing, coming up with 40 names, strangers. Oh, I see we have a lot in common. Let's have a Zoom call. Well, they don't know who you are. They don't know why you're contacting them. They don't know why now they're going to spend and invest in a Zoom call. But if it's like, hey, thanks for doing something for me, and I think you could be a guest. Well, now there's a premium there. And now they're almost in a position where, how do I qualify for this? Versus how do I deal with it or put up with it or turn the person down? So you're always, you can't fill a jar until you took the lid off. So you got to open something up to really integrate something with it. And it's all very casual. It's only when you get really hot and heavy that people get turned off. When it's just, hey, thanks for taking the poll. I really appreciate it. By the way, if you're ever interested, so it's not like let's do something, but hey, if you have an interest or your desire is to do something, whatever you choose. And I typically template it. And I think that's the other key to time efficiency is no one knows what anybody else is getting. But if everybody else did something to stimulate getting something, then the response can be similar. So too many people think, well, I just answered this question this way. Let me come up with a new one. Well, if it's the same question, it should pretty much be the same answer. And you don't want to keep wasting time, and you'll invest more time when you get more exposure, more reach. And it's only through doing it that you understand, hey, that verbiage worked. That approach worked. This didn't work so well. And somebody is a stranger when you met them, and they're a stranger when you left them if nothing happened in between. So if you all you do is thank someone, that's enough in itself. Anything that goes from it is gravy. And again, having a schedule. What I also learned about LinkedIn, and it happened to me early on, you go to LinkedIn in the morning, and what you do, well, who sent a connection request, right? Who commented, who liked, who did all this stuff, and now I'm responding to it. Well, what if no one did anything? Would that be the way you spent your time on LinkedIn? No, you do what you had to do first, right? Is like, what is my intent? And then when I'm finished with that, then I move on to what does everybody want? But if your day is scheduled around everybody else's interest, where does your interest show up? Where are you proactive versus being reactive? And there's a point where go to a grocery store, and if all of a sudden milk's $80 a gallon, you say, I'm not that thirsty today for milk. How expensive is it? And what's the benefit? I mean, if you loved milk and it was something that, hey, maybe you would pay the $80. But in most cases, it's continuous improvement over time with knowledge, gaining knowledge, and making a difference, is getting that extra response, because everything is you take a step, I take a step, nobody should take two steps. If you keep commenting on someone's post and they don't respond to you, pretty soon you're not commenting anymore. You haven't been, acknowledged. You haven't been returned. Carl.
Yeah, so there's so much material and content here to try to focus on. So um, essentially, you're going to start off, even though this is an unscripted conversation, you have an topic of relevance that you think you and your audience have in common. And part of it is that you've thought about it, you've planned it, you've looked at it, and you're saying, this is what we're going to talk about because I think my audience will want to hear about it, learn about it. And then you amplify that by going out and handpicking guests who can be good guests, who can bring good conversation to the table that again is something that the audience is looking for. So now at this time, we're starting to build a group of people who all have this common interest in a topic, in a subject, in a cause or an outcome that they want to achieve. And you're working to build on this to continue to bring information and value, as you called it. You've got the education, you have the inspiration, you have the entertainment. These are elements you think should be present in each conversation. And this is going to grow. So now that we started to have the basic foundation of communication and knowing that we have to look at all forms of communication, whether it's email or LinkedIn Live or a newsletter or a poll or something else. I remember once we were doing an economic development project in a small rural community, and we were trying to get the word out on a potential change that could have great impact on the community. And somebody said, everything you've just told us won't work as far as communicating. We go, why? He says, because they don't have the internet. There is no newspaper. So what you have to do is put a flyer on the front of the post office on their bulletin board. So when they come in to pick up the mail, they can see the flyer and know what's going on. This was a great throwback to us in forms of communication. It was a little bit more primitive than we had anticipated, but it pointed out that everybody communicates a little bit differently. And as much as we would like to standardize on LinkedIn, we know that not everybody uses LinkedIn, which is why I'm dual broadcasting on Facebook and YouTube so that people who prefer those media platforms, you can do so much to try to accommodate your audience. And then at some point it gets too complicated, too costly. So we've got to keep looking at the efficiencies of how we communicate to our audience so that we're providing the value. But at some point, I'm still not using TikTok. I'm still not using Instagram. I know that I get criticized occasionally for not taking advantage of those two, but there's just too many platforms and I can't be everywhere all the time. So now I want to grow my crew though. So I have somebody in my audience and I say, hey, we're talking about this topic, but I want to have more people in my audience who all have an interest in this because somewhere down the line, we're going to pull the trigger. We're going to say, I want you all to vote. I want you all to show up for a town hall meeting. I want you all to give me your opinion on something so I can get a feel for what's real as opposed to what I'm thinking in my head. So, how do you get to that larger group? How do you reach to your audience and use them like a speaker or amplifier to share the conversation, the communication to a much, much larger group of people?
Great question. And the answer is a lot of great guests syndicate themselves. So a lot of my guests were Harvey's guest or Kelly's guest. That's how I met Ford. Ford actually, one of his niches is franchising. And he got attracted to Harvey on the franchise show. I happened to watch the show or happened to have a conversation with Harvey. And he said, hey, he'd be a great guy for you. Just like I'm showing up here. And if you put it together with familiarity, let's say it's a comedy show. Well, someone's dad who shows up every week is going to be the same guy. It's not going to be a new dad every week. So once you get your core, and I always like to go with three people when possible. So it's me, the core person, and the new person. Now the new person gets to meet two people. Two people get to meld with that new person, and the two people who are experienced are good at bringing people in, supporting people, promoting people. Brand new people are they're just first shot at it. They overdo or underdo, and why not get a medium element, and that's all you need, because it's what's being said again, the content that's being created, not just a personality. Plus, there's something to dependability, consistency, and some people are here and then they're not there anymore. It's is here for the long term, who is dependable, and who do you want to build with. So at a certain point, you get out of your shell and you start deciding, and that's where the big premium comes in. People get to know, like, and trust you, and now you've gotten to know, like, trust them. You understand more of who they are, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and now there could be an opportunity to fit into it versus I'm good, you're great, let's get together and do something even better. Well, that's just a little bit too much of a reach versus who comes to mind, right? I've done a show with Kelly Stanecki for 18 months every Thursday. And it's only made both of us better because we got better for the experience, but everybody's expanded beyond it and from it. But we're smart enough not to leave it, because if it was good enough to learn, good enough to grow, once you feel like I'm there, you're never there. What got you there in the first place is what should keep you there in the long term. And I think there's where, we have our cohort group that meets. That's when people come together around the table together and share, because it's how much can I accelerate? How much can I compress as far as time and effort? How do I get to where I'm going sooner and easier? And the other element, it's more fun. Anytime you're having fun doing something, it's easier to continue doing. If you wake up and say, gosh, I got to go to do this, that will eventually reflect and project on the audience, on your co host. But if you're having a ball, it doesn't even matter why. People just, like I always say, people hear your music before they care about your words. If you're jumping up and down and so excited and you can't hold it in, everybody starts getting excited. So, it's really kind of being the master of ceremonies, the host, the co-host, the audience, all at the same time, and knowing when to shift gears, and knowing when, hey, we've had a little too much of that. Let's move to the entertainment side. I'm fortunate I have enough sayings that sending visual pictures is easier sometimes than trying to get technically defined by what you're doing. So uh, with that said, how do you create more interest, excitement? And the other big area as far as growing your group is promotion. I haven't reached the level of Harvey, but he sent 1,000 invitations a week to one show. He gets 150, he gets
Yeah,
100. Go ahead.
let's talk about Harvey for a little bit, because between everybody we know, Harvey has probably been the fastest growing theme target. He has his own LinkedIn live show called The Franchising Show. So it's easy to remember because he's talking about franchising. And we talked about syndication. And for those of you who are not familiar with the term, basically everyone in the world knows so many people. They're in their fan base, they're in their family, whatever you call it, their network. And one of the tricks or techniques that you mentioned, Don, is when you invite a guest to your show, you don't want to invite somebody who knows only one person because they have a very small network. You're not going to grow very fast if all they're bringing is one fan or one supporter or one follower of what they're doing. But if you bring somebody like Harvey now, Harvey went out and identified all the leaders in the franchising industry internationally, and he invited them to their show. And on his show, then whenever he's talking with this person, that person has all these people who follow and want to know what that person is saying. And so Harvey's show gets bigger and bigger every time he has a new guest because he's borrowing, he's bringing people to his show. And if they like his show, they become not only a fan and follower of his guest, but also of Harvey. So his show keeps growing. And then as you were explaining, Don, he's very intentional, very methodical. It isn't like, let's see what happens. He goes, no, he's going out there and saying, I want you people to come to my show because I'm talking with this person. And for whatever reason, he thinks the relevance is high enough in that program that people go, oh, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate the opportunity to listen in on what this person is going to say. So he's thinking about relevance all the time. He's thinking about how a guest is relevant, what they're saying is relevant to his audience, and then he's just going at it. I mean, he's a machine that just goes out and says, okay, I'm working it all the time. I'm trying to figure out how to create a bigger audience so that he is impactful. He's a leader, as we would call it, or a thought leader within the area of franchising. And he's doing it, though, by syndication, by borrowing crowds, by adopting crowds, and trying to be relevant to this larger and larger group of people. So I think that people who understand how Harvey goes about building his crowd for the franchise show can learn a lot because he's testing all the elements on how he goes out there and makes something happen.
Yeah, for sure. And, he's aggressive. Uh, his focus is franchising, but like I say, his numbers from day one were 1,000 invites, 150 acceptance, 50 show up. Out of the 50 show up, eventually 20, 30 continue. And then the thousands layers on that, and that goes to 30, 40. If you see his show, and actually my show is in about 8 minutes, I'm going to have to take off. But Harvey's show is right after my show. And you'll see 40, 50 franchise people commenting. I mean, it never stops because he's developed that. And he hasn't just developed it around his connections. He actually found out that most of his connections aren't people who care about his show, but he'll go out and find people by going through franchise lists outside of LinkedIn, go through organizational lists and see, hey, these people are showing up at all the conferences. Let's invite them. And then one last thing is having a person that's so high prominence that everybody says, well, if it's good enough for Jackson Hewitt or John Hewitt, it's good enough for me. And you can use that as your feature box on your profile, and all of a sudden Jackson or John Hewitt keeps selling. But with that said, I got to run. I love doing this, Carl. I'm always there for you. And I want to tell everybody who sees this now and sees this in the future, if you ever want to do or learn about anything Carl's doing, Carl's one of the best in the business. I've had the opportunity to know people like Harvey and Kelly and even more people. This is the place. Mark your calendar, continue to come here. Carl, I want to thank you again. Got to split because in 6 minutes I'm on, and I got a minute and 29 seconds to get with my guests. So thank you. This has been just terrific. Great way to start a day. I'll leave right now and look forward to seeing you probably Thursday. Take care. Bye for now.
My God. So, yes, as Don puts on his own show on LinkedIn Live Monday through Thursday at 9 o'clock Mountain Time. And so he had to scoot to get to his show because he has some guests lined up. And he had to get into the studio, make sure everything's working. We were laughing this morning as we got started that it's almost like every other time we do a show, there's some kind of technical difficulty that has to be worked out in advance. And this morning we didn't have one. So we got off to a great start this morning. Samira has put in another comment that I want to address here in the final minutes of today's program. There are so many people out there on in any group, and we're keep trying to come up with a way to explain the fact that there's a core group of people like Don and I work with, where we work with each other all the time. We're talking to each other all the time. We're in a high level of mutual support. Then there's a lesser group. And if you think of concentric rings around you where you're the hub, as you move outward from the center of this hub, you'll find people that are still listening, still getting value from you, but your interaction goes down. I have had people who have listened to my shows, who have read my daily and weekly newsletter, Instant Funding, and I don't hear anything from them for months. And then suddenly they pop up and they go, "Hey, Carl, something you did today triggered me to want to talk to you about something." And it isn't that they're not reacting, that they're not there. They're simply a different style. They may be less relevance, as Don and I talked about it. So until you happen to cross over a topic where the relevance peaks, and they now have something to talk to you about. But by putting out the show, this LinkedIn Live show, plus my newsletter, I'm basically telling everybody I'm open for business. I'm going to be talking about a variety of topics that I hope are relevant every day to everyone. But I know that the degree of relevance is going to change. It's going to be high some days and low other days. But I keep working, as Don and I discussed, to try to create content material, have guests on the show who can bring value to everyone who's listening in the audience. But the vast majority of people do nothing. Don has statistics that say 80% of the people on LinkedIn never comment, never respond, don't show their hand or anything. They may be there, they may be listening quietly, they may be passively participating in your community that you've built, but they're very difficult to track or know exactly what's on their mind. It becomes kind of a guessing game where you're saying, I hope I'm on target. I hope this guest is of interest to everyone that's in my community as I've defined my community and as I continue to work to keep content focused within my community, but they're basically absent. So I had built up a huge number of followers on LinkedIn who almost all of them had reached out to me and said, "I'd like to connect." And I said, "Okay." And then I never heard from them again. No comments, no questions, no emails, no follow up, no engagements, just nothing. But they're sitting there in my follower list. So when I was thinking about restructuring my communications and how I'm sharing my information on funding, Don introduced me to LinkedIn Live and said, "Here's another way of communicating to a portion of the people that you want to talk to. But you should also do a newsletter, because some people can do a newsletter who don't want to listen to video, and vice versa." And when I did that, I learned in LinkedIn that if I post out a newsletter, the only way you get the newsletter is to subscribe to it or to go to my profile and then look under the tab for newsletter, then you can read it. But people who subscribe are acknowledging that they want my content, that they want the word that I'm putting out there. And I've been building my subscriber list, which is a subset of my follower list. And I know that my subscriber list is a little more engaged, a little more interested. I'm a little more relevant to them. That doesn't mean that what I'm doing or saying isn't having value or isn't, providing some information to everyone else. But I don't know that. I don't have any way of reaching them, and so that again, that's a bit of a guessing game. So anytime you have a chance to comment on somebody's post, it would be good for you to do that. One, it tells the person, what you're thinking about, whether you agree, disagree, or you're seeking more information, or you're adding information to the conversation. This is a way of pay it forward, of sharing who you are, what you're thinking about, what you think is relevant. And that helps you better identify who you want to work with, who you want in your community, and you get feedback from your community on what they are valuing, what they think is of relevance to them. So today's topic, I had Don on because I'm working with several projects, funding projects, and some of these are in community development. And we're asking ourselves, how do we get a group of people who may not know each other to come together, to work together, to create a team within that community so that we can do more as a group than we can do individually? And how do we share that information? How do we do that efficiently? These are lots of questions that we'll continue to work on, but they're all critical to funding. If you're going to go out and ask somebody for money, they have to know you exist. They have to know why they care. Sometimes you have to educate them on how you bring benefit to them. And then you have to put that information in front of them where they can see it and they can evaluate it and they can act on it. If you don't have a communication channel, if you don't have a message, if they don't know that you exist, you can't get any funding out of them. So this is all part of the skill and technique and method for raising funding, but it's also fundamental to just operating your business or running your organization or performing your programs. So this is the end of today's program. We've spent an hour today. Thank you all in the audience for being with us. I appreciate everybody who commented, especially because I love feedback. And so keep that coming. We'll have more guests in future shows, Tuesday mornings at 8 o'clock Denver time, Mountain Daylight Time at the present. And we'll see you all next week.